The world has changed, leading many to question the future of the economy and their personal finances. Burton understands the changing dynamics of the market and the economic realities facing our communities. No one can predict the future, but having an advisor that maximizes your tax advantages and helps achieve your financial goals can lead to greater stability. Let Burton's accountants and advisors help protect you, your family, and your business. Burton LLP. We listen, we solve, we
Good morning. My name is Max Gross. I'm the editor-in-chief of Commercial Observer. Before we get started, I'd like to thank today's program sponsor, Burton LLP. Today's program is part of our Commercial Observer Innovation Week, and I hope to see you all at tomorrow's third annual Innovators Forum at 60 Madison Avenue. We will also be closing out Innovation Week on Friday with a special power briefing on multifamily investment opportunities. Registration links for both events can be found in our chat box. And now onto today's program. As a member of the real estate journalism universe, I'm always listening to the chatter and listening for cries of pain, cries of joy, cries of bewilderment, I guess. And in September, I heard something profound. It was beyond a cheer. It was Mount Vesuvius in eruption. Everybody, and I mean everybody in real estate, was relieved, happy, joyous that Google had executed on its option to purchase St. John's Terminal. Which the general consensus was that it was an incredible vote of confidence in New York, confidence in office, confidence in the tech sector, confidence in Hudson Square. And it was one of these great stories that was happening in a year that had a lot of bad stories. This was a good one. So I'm really profoundly pleased that we were able to gather today's speakers who were all intimately involved in this. From Google, we have Paul Dara, who's the director of real estate. From Oxford Properties, we have Adam Frazier, who is the head of the New York region, and Mark Rositzky of Cook Fox, which is designing this gem along the Hudson. So I would like to say welcome to you all. Adam and Mark, I was wondering if we could start with you guys. St. John's, you guys had this plan before Google. So tell us what the original plan was for this property.
I can start. We actually, we'll go in origin story order a little bit here. Okay. It's a really fascinating site, fascinating building. We had been working on the site and the project several years before Oxford. We were working with Atlas and Westbrook on the site. And even arguably decades before that, many developers had looked at this site and trying to kind of unlock a lot of its great potential. And it's again, it's a fascinating building. It was originally built in 1934 as part of the New York Central Railroad system. And it was the terminal building for what we now know as the High Line, where trains would come in and out of there. And when we were working with Westbrook and Atlas, we worked through a ULURP process and really learned a lot about the site and about the working with the community. And once it was sold to Oxford, it kind of gave us a chance to take a deep breath, look back, and really figure out how to present the project to them. And the thing that was really the most fascinating was what you couldn't actually see in this 3 block long building that we wanted to unearth, that we wanted to really celebrate the rails and the platforms that were inside the building, so that these rail cars could go in and out of that building. And once we could kind of make that cut, we could celebrate what you see today with the big portal around it, and really celebrate what you could see. And then it also gave this chance to build something over that existing structure and reuse the existing structure for the first 3 floors. And when we presented it to Oxford, we had this Venn diagram that showed 3 really important overlapping things: health and wellness, flexibility, and authenticity. And what was really interesting, I'll hand it over to Adam, but they went out and talked to a bunch of tech tenants and came back and found that they were really interested in the same 3 themes.
Mm. Adam, yeah, tell us the story from Oxford's perspective.
So we were introduced to the site in 2017 through a competitive bid process. We were also introduced to Mark and Rick Cook, who told a very similar story to the one that Mark's speaking about. And they were certainly very, very passionate about the building. They had been a part of it for a really long time. And so we leveraged a lot of the knowledge that they had and a lot of their view on what it could be. But I think at the time when we got involved with it, the site was for sale at a pretty expensive price. The neighborhood and the neighborhood really there was unproven at the time, and the market didn't really understand it to a large extent. We had, Trinity and Norgis and Hines had gotten involved in some buildings through a large portfolio, but it really hadn't taken shape yet. And so there was a fair bit of risk around the site because of just, it being kind of a new market. On top of that, there was about 20 million feet coming to the market over the following 3-4 years. And so kind of looked at the world and we said, all right, if we got involved with this, what do we have to do to really create something that's truly unique? And can we do that with any site that we're, getting involved with? And we thought that with this one, after speaking with Rick and Mark and a bunch of different people, we thought we could really achieve that. And we really fell in love with it. And that love and passion that they had, was contagious. And we thought we could achieve this urban horizontal campus that didn't really exist anywhere in New York City at the time, except in one primary spot, which was Chelsea. And Google had done it organically. And we didn't set out to say, okay, hey, Google is the group that we are going to get to be here. We thought it could be a number of different tenants that were looking to make a strategic decision to be at a site that could achieve this urban campus feel, which was largely driven off of these large floor plates. And we embraced that thesis of, connectivity in addition to flexibility, authenticity, and health and wellness. So we kind of all started moving together in this one way. And we went on this incredible journey to unpackage, why we were making certain decisions to create this incredible building.
Well, Adam, you mentioned that the neighborhood was at the time unproven. So what timeline are we talking about? When was this first?
This was 2017, 2018.
Uh-huh.
And so one Soho Square had taken shape, and the neighborhood had this name, Hudson Square. And we spent a lot of time trying to unpackage what Hudson Square was. And we said, okay, look, do we, just from a branding perspective, do we start to call it Hudson Square? Do we speak to it as though it's Soho? Is this the West Village? What is it? And so, again, we started to speak to a lot of different people, and eventually we thought we were creating something so incredible that we could really be the anchor of this neighborhood. As it turns out, not long after that, Google started to, play a big role in that evolution of the neighborhood. And then Disney in 2018, early 2019, planted their flag to create their headquarters there. And so this small 10 million square foot micro market in New York City started to really emerge. And it was an old printing press district. So it had this kind of vibe and roots that needed to be kind of fostered and reimagined. brought to life again. So there were a number of different developments that started to take form as we really got involved with this, both on an office standpoint and a residential standpoint.
So from the design perspective, from the neighborhood perspective, from the property perspective, we're hearing now, Paul, from your perspective, as a tenant, tell us what you saw, because this was very early in the process that Google signed up, right? So tell us a little bit about, what did you see from the beginning?
So I think, as Adam mentioned, we have an affinity for low-rise, full block buildings that can accommodate our occupancy in a unique way. We've had our eye on St. John's Terminal for a while, even prior to Oxford stepping in and purchasing the asset. So for us, exciting to begin a partnership with Oxford as they explored what this asset could be, and have a seat at the table, right, influencing the design of the base building, working with Mark and the Cook Fox team to really stress test what would it look like, not just for multiple tenants, but for Google to occupy the building. And I think we very early created a partnership around how we collectively thought about this asset. Certainly we have a lot of experience in 111 8th and Chelsea Market in terms of a similar kind of asset type, but to be able to participate in the design of a base building that could better support our ongoing operations with our type of occupancy was a really unique opportunity. So we were in early. We had a seat at the table for the better part of, I think, a year and a half while we were figuring out the economics of the deal. That really led to the design of, I think, what is a very world-class building, but a world-class building that really best supports Google or potentially any other tech tenant who occupies and operates very differently than what might be a high-rise solution for in any place else in the city.
Could you talk, Paul, you and Mark and Adam, anybody feel free to chime in, but what were the bespoke elements? What were the things that, started, okay, now that we know that we have Google in this process with their seat at the table, like, what specifically changed?
Well, maybe can I start that one out and you can,
of course,
filter and jump in there. I think we had designed a lot of the base building. I will say that we went on this journey with Mark and with Rick to create this workplace of the future, and we did have this idea of large floor plates, low horizontal building, which Paul mentioned, and we spoke to a lot of Paul's friends to get smart on what would be the ideal type of building for a tenant that rhymed with a Google or something like that.
Google or a Google or right.
And so the biggest thing that we had was we had these large floors, but we didn't really understand why people liked the large floor plate. And we wanted to create the most perfect floor plate. And we had no constraints on the site, so the art of the possible was tremendous. And that left us with some tough decisions because we didn't know if the right size was 70,000 feet or 85,000 feet or 105,000 feet. It wasn't just like, okay, let's make it as big as we can. It was really, let's make it as perfect as we can. And so we created this base building design initially with 2 cores, and we could have had 4 cores, 5 cores. We could have demolished the whole building, but we decided that we would create basically 2 buildings within one. And that gave people the flexibility to, liquidate any of their space that they needed to at a certain point in time, or to grow into space at a certain point in time. We decided that it would be 12 stories, and that was really capturing about 3 acres of outdoor space. So we had basically 3 primary terraces in the building that gave you the horizontal design, but also gave you some really bespoke areas within the building to have outdoor space and event space. We knew that the building was largely going to be driven not just by how many people you can get in there to work, but the events and opportunities you can have as a tenant to have a lot of people in there for events and guest opportunities and have people in there. So when Google came along, we were at this perfect moment where we put a lot of things on paper. We created this base of design, and we were just hoping that we got it right. And so Paul came in with his team and validated a lot of the things that we had done. but also said, hey, look, in one of the cores, you had 12 elevators and 9 elevators. We think we need an additional 3 elevators. So let's get that to 12 in another core. And then, they tweaked some of the floor plates so that it worked well with their design. And then they had some internal connectivity that they really could opine on to help us shape up and validate some of the final decisions. And then they took it to a whole nother level, which was really relating to the curtain wall and things, just before COVID and then with COVID as well. So I don't know, Mark and Paul, you could jump in from there. And that's the way I know the story.
Yeah, I think that's really consistent with what I remember as well. One thing I really appreciate about Adam and and Dean Shapiro and the Oxford team is that they were really crystal clear about, from the very beginning, about making a lot of these decisions. They really, every time it came to kind of a crossroads, they would kind of go back to what is unique about this building. And so, as I had said, we went through this EULA process, which there was actually an analysis at the very end. If you kept an commercial office building here, and we did some environmental analysis with AKRF, and we actually got it approved to be significantly taller than the final 12-story building. But Oxford was very clear that don't even bother studying smaller plates, king of the world suites, greater view, lowest building possible, biggest floor plates possible. Where else in New York can you get floor plates that are in excess of 100,000 square feet for your typical floor? And the other thing is they were really interested in what we had learned in the EULA process, in this really intensive community engagement process. What was the community interested in? And one of those things was really trying to create this great connection to the park. And when Google became involved, one of the things we did first, when they became interested in, is we kind of looked up what is the fastest way to get from 111 to 8th Avenue to the 550 Washington building. And the answer was by bike. And not only that, but accessing this incredible resource that the city has of Hudson River Park, that it sits adjacent to that, and that you could easily bike from the 111 8th building to this 550 building. And even before Google became involved, bike entry and bike storage was important. But once Google became involved, it became kind of a next level thing as well. And multiple entry points as well. It's a 2-block long building. So entering it from both ends and multiple points in the middle were always important parts of the study. But once Google became involved, it was really important about their kind of specific design. And one other thing about what Adam had said about the elevator core, we had biased more elevators towards the north because we were looking at where we thought people were coming from, looking at subways and so forth. And once we started to talk to Google, they said, no, that's really not the issue at all. It's really travel during the day, that people move between floors to different meetings a lot during the day. So it's really important to have very good vertical transportation and have that circulation evened out.
And I think it's a great point, Mark, because a lot of the intervention or the opportunity we had was to address all of the operational aspects of how we are going to live in the building, right? Which some of the interventions were additional loading docks to support access. What I'm going to say is connectivity of a service layer that doesn't impact the Googler in kind of on our typical floors, so we could still service the building in a better way. So there was a lot of partnership around solving for not just the day one design, but how we're going to live in the space long term, and how we're, we certainly live in a similar asset at 111 8th, and it gave us an opportunity to solve for a lot of the operational issues we know that is in a legacy building that we occupy in a brand new build-to-suit. And I think Adam was a great partner in, at the time, it was a lease with the option to purchase, is ensuring that we were in partnership enabling the building to be multi-tenant or single tenant for Google. And so we always had that as a litmus test around some of the decisions we were making, and the collaboration that happened was assessing options and what was the impact of those relative to that, which I think made us all smarter about how we studied and then what we implemented as solutions that ultimately deliver a great product for us, but also I think as a development building, delivered a great product for multiple tenant uses. Now, we've since purchased the building, so the good news is all of that has certainly been valuable for us as we look at this as a very long-term asset for us now.
I do want to talk a little bit about the location. We were talking about how it's within biking distance, closest ways to get there to the Chelsea campus. There's a part of me when I saw that you guys were moving in there was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. That there was almost like, the only other option really, if you were really going to try to connect these things physically, would be Hudson Yards. Would be like to go to Hudson Yards or something that could manage that big a move, that much square footage, et cetera. Was it, when you saw this as was this like, oh, well, there's the logical solution, Paul? Or was, was it like, this was always meant to be, or tell me a little bit about what your thinking was with this.
It was always meant to be.
It was always meant to be.
I think, we were looking at multiple options, right? And Hudson Square compared to Hudson Yards is a very different product. It's an amazing contribution to the city in terms of, but at the time could not deliver the collective square footage we were looking for. And so it really wasn't as much an option as one might think, although proximate in a similar way. I think Hudson Square as a neighborhood is certainly much more in keeping with Chelsea and kind of how we think about that community and the neighborhood. What's been interesting, I think, as Adam said, since 2017, when we started this conversation, the neighborhood has evolved, right? Disney being a key, kind of development site, but the residential that has evolved over time makes it really, really similar to Chelsea in that it's a live, work, play neighborhood. There's a really significant difference of that experience now, even 3-4 years later, as to what I think is a much more diverse and vibrant neighborhood. So that was very compelling. And then, it's a nice stroll between Hudson Square and Chelsea to have a half an hour meeting as you're walking up the west side along Hudson River Park Trust. Or Hudson River Park, which, as Mark mentioned, is a great connector for us in terms of our campuses. So it was very obvious.
It was. Now, obviously,
well, I think I want to just add to Paul for a second. I think it was interesting when we were going through the marketing process. You realize that the neighborhood is so much more connected than a lot of other neighborhoods now there in the city, actually, which was a bit of a misnomer in the beginning that it wasn't connected and it was kind of separate from a lot of places. You have this bicycle highway on the west side, which is tremendous, as Mark and Paul mentioned, but we used to say it's really connected to the four corners of the world, which was you've got an easy line up on the 1. You can catch the E and A and C to the east side of Manhattan. And then that also carries you all through Brooklyn. And the path is only a couple of blocks away, which brings you to New Jersey. So it is hyper connected, actually. And I think people don't really realize that. And I think that's going to be a major, major plus for this neighborhood as people start to realize that over time.
Do you think that, obviously, Paul talked about, residential that's been coming to Hudson Square. What about retail, dining, stuff like that all the people in Disney, Google will want? Do you think that that's on its way as well?
100%. I think it's absolutely happening. If I was a bar owner, I would open up a bar in Hudson Square, although I know that Ear Inn is a favorite by a lot of us. But I think that it is absolutely it's going to evolve in I think a really productive way as time goes on because of that.
Yeah, not only is Disney and Google obviously providing a huge influx of workers every day to the site, but more and more commercial buildings and residential buildings are being developed there. And we kind of saw this coming as well. Providing greater connection to that park and to the waterfront was very much one of the things that we were really excited about as we were developing this. It's also one of the things that we really learned from the community when we went through the ULURP process.
Mhm.
At one point, we had a raised park, pre Oxford and Google, over Houston Street. It was kind of a little remnant of the High Line. And what the community was really clear about is that they felt that green space on the ground was much more important. And it gave us, when we were studying the building for Oxford, it gave us this opportunity to pull the building back and provide this 40 feet back from the property line and provide this public park, what we're now calling St. John's Plaza, in front of the building. And it really serves to bring the Hudson River Park one block closer to that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. So now we talked a little bit about, okay, we get the company that rhymes with Schmoogle on board, and everything changes with that. What about the other big thing that everything must have changed with, which was COVID? Once COVID happens, I imagine there had to have been some rethinking of design, some rethinking of how you wanted this project to proceed. Adam, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, I think that and again, this is a total partnership at this point between Paul and Mark too. So you guys jump in as well. I think that when COVID hit, we were well prepared for the design of this building to a large degree. It was open space. We did focus on the mechanicals of the building, and those were well suited to support the workplace in this new environment. But we were kind of there in a large way before. I think what did happen is that we did increase some of the filtration that we had within the building. We added some UV lighting within the air handling units that could further filter out some of the air on the floors. So that is one of the enhancements. We also put extra filtration in the elevator cabs. So that had greater air circulation and cleaner air within those pieces of the building. And then, everything went further to touchless. We were kind of already there with destination dispatch, but I think that the touchless environment is just so pronounced now, and it's even more so in St. John's than it would have been before. But we're pretty much there now. It's going to be touchless on the entrance doors and things like that. Mark and Paul, and maybe even more detail within the interior build-outs that you're seeing.
Sure, or maybe slightly less detail, because I think what's really kind of interesting is the short answer is not much. I mean, we of course did a lot of analysis and did all the things that Adam's describing, implemented greater filtration and all this touchless systems. But the building itself was really set up for kind of all the things that we're focusing in on as a post-COVID era, that it has multiple entrance points. It has an enormous lobby. Not only does it have all these elevators that we've discussed before, but probably much more importantly, it always had the central stair and multiple kind of convenience stairs to really encourage people to not sit around and wait for this magic box, but to go ahead and walk up and down the building. And as we talked about, it's 1.3 million square feet, all in 12 stories. So you can easily walk it. And with the Google team and with Oxford, develop these really gracious stairs that are actually egress stairs as well. There's a couple of them in the building, but the ones that you think of as more kind of conventional egress stairs also have some glazing and daylighting to encourage people to use those. And other things that we've already touched upon, incredible bike storage. There's bike storage for over 500 bikes in the building. And that was always pre-COVID to have this kind of celebrated bike entrance and a dedicated storage area for them that's connected to their health and wellness center.
Yeah, and I would also add that not much changed, but part of that is because the building, the degree of sustainability that's embedded in the building, but more so ultimately the adaptability of these large floor plates, right, enables us to have a lot of latitude of how we plan for the future. And there will be a lot of changes as we start to return to the office and really understand how people are going to work in the space. But these floor plates enable the ongoing adaptability that we were already planning for, knowing that it was going to be a long-term asset for us. So I think it gives us a great environment to just continue to test and iterate with a really solid core and infrastructure, as Mark describes, that enables us to move through the building and support our what will likely be ongoing, very different occupancy strategies, right, for the next several years. So.
Mhm.
During the, I'm sorry, Max, during this
Of course.
time, this is something that we quoted Paul frequently about looking at what you would do. And Paul's quote was always no regret improvements. That it's stuff that you would want to do anyway, that just makes the building that much better.
Mhm. Obviously, not every tenant is Google, but I am curious what, like, are you going to be, do you think that a lot of these things are going to be blueprints for other projects that you're going to see, like that you're working on in terms of office in the city or even beyond the city?
And I have a kind of a unique answer to that one. So when we started the design, we went on a field trip, and we went on a few of them. We went out to the West Coast, we went to London, went to Chicago, went to Boston, went to Canada. We spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we made the right decision. That allowed us to be kind of, at least have an informed opinion about every decision we were making, and everything had to answer the question why. But when we went on the field trip and we would go meet with all these different tenants of different buildings, we would ask them, the first question is, what's your biggest pain point? And they would say that, flexibility is the number one thing. They would say, our business is changing so fast every day. We need the ability to adapt, almost exactly to what Paul just said. And so, they need the floor plate, and the power and the air conditioning and everything to work so that they can be very kind of nimble with changing and adapting to whatever's coming their way, because their business is changing so fast. And so that was like, for us, you could see on this building, it's 460 feet long on the new build, and up to 60 feet wide from core to window, and there are no columns. And so that gives you just a tremendous amount of opportunity to be adaptable and flexible to meet all these things that Paul's talking about, and all these other tenants are trying to shoot for the same thing. So I do think that it is absolutely going to be a model for what's to come when you can do it. But that's why this is so unique is that you can do that here.
Right. Now, so much happened before COVID. You guys had this great lease that was all set, and there was this option to purchase, and then there's this meteor that hits the market in the form of this pandemic. And Paul, you had, to a certain extent, an escape clause. You could have been like, all right, we've got a lease, but we're not going to necessarily set down our roots. What made you, why go the extra step and say, all right, no, we are setting down our roots. This is an important thing. We're going to stay here long term. Could you take us into a little bit of your thinking about that?
Sure. So I think Google's set down its roots many years ago, right? We've been in New York City for more than 20 years now. We have 12,000 employees in New York. So it is our second largest office outside of Mountain View. And so this is really about our continued investment in New York, right? It's about creating what is now our kind of second anchor, which is Hudson Square. As we return to the office, we have now our global business operations group is already in Hudson Square. We've leased space in 315, 345 in advance of 550 being delivered. 345, 315 Hudson, which is now home to our global business organization. Will soon outgrow those buildings as we deliver 550. So it's very much Hudson Square is a second campus for us that will enable us to grow to 14,000 and beyond. We very much view New York as, amazing talent, a creative, very different, and the diversity of industry that is New York is an exciting place for us to be. So New York will continue to be home for a very long time, and our investment will continue. So Hudson Square is if we've outgrown Chelsea, right? We're moving into Pier 57 as of January. That's as far as we can go to the west side. So Hudson Square will be the next big development for us.
Mm-hmm. But was there any discussion just all right, a physical plant is a lot less important, because this is the existential question that so many tenants are having right now is do we, need real estate in the same way that we used to need real estate? There's so much of New York real estate is dependent on the idea that the talent is here, we have to be here too. If the talent is scattered, is this as important as it used to be?
So I think what we're seeing is urban environments continue to be important, right? Bringing people together is critical. The benefit of having a place for employees to come and collaborate and engage is not going away. Matter of fact, it will become more important even if we enable more flexibility of the work week and kind of a hybrid work week model. So I think the exact space, right? What might be in the space may evolve and change as we learn more about behavior and people coming back to the office. But the importance of place warrants the investment in physical assets that we will learn from over time as we start to see more and more people coming back into the office. We officially returned to the office as of January 10th. We've enabled Googlers to begin to come into the office as of October 20th of this year. We've opened all of our buildings, and we're excited to see people coming back in and really benefiting from being back together. So that is, I think, true for many businesses. So,
Paul, I think of everybody as a Googler. We all Google. So, Adam, I wanted I wanted to get your take, Adam. Talk a little bit about New York's evolution as a tech hub. I mean, obviously, it's such an important tenant right now. Tell us a little bit about Oxford's thinking about the tech tenant.
I think we look at virtually all tenants right now as a tech tenant. I think that you're to what Paul was saying about talent, it is such a massive talent hub. And I think a lot of these groups are competing for the same talent. So we look at it as, okay, it's clearly been validated as a place where the true tech tenants want to be, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Spotifys, Amazons, and they're here largely for the access to the talent. And so we believe in New York. We think that it's going to continue to grow in that way. I think that there's, there has been some stutter steps over the last 12 months of what are the typical tech tenants going to do in terms of coming back to work. But we feel the way that Paul feels is that we think people are ultimately going to come back, and we're seeing it in a major way here, and that it goes way beyond just people that are in the traditional tech companies, the JP Morgans, the banks, way beyond those people. And when we went through our marketing process, we quickly learned that all of these tenants are competing for the same people. We did not think that a certain group, was competing for the same talent that Google was, and they wanted to be in a place like Hudson Square or at St. John's Terminal, because that's where the talent wants to be, in a place like that. So we believe in New York. We think that it's continuing to evolve to more and more tech, largely because that's the way of the world, and that New York is evolving into that zone.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about? I mean, I'm sorry to go back a little bit, but I did want to just ask you. Paul gave us his perspective on, obviously Google had made its decisions a long time ago that they were going to, be in New York. What were your thoughts about, the execution of the sale? Were you at all worried that it might not happen when COVID hit, or was that always? Were you always pretty confident this was going to happen?
I think you never know that something is going to happen until it's done. I've learned that, pretty well over my years in real estate. I think that, we were excited that they embraced the same vision that we did initially. They've become very close partners along the journey. We had hoped that they would execute on that, but I think that we also thought there was a lot of opportunity for the terminal, if we owned it as well. We would have been very excited if we had it too. So I think that, we're thrilled with the outcome right now. And if they did not go along that path, I think we would have been very successful as well. So I think that, there's always a time where you kind of try to understand if they'll do it or they don't. But I think we all felt pretty good. If they didn't, that would be all right. And we were happy with the choice that they made.
Got it. So I want to get back to something that I started with, which was, this was such a happy moment for New York office when this deal was signed, simply because there was, so much rethinking of office. Oh my God, are people going to ever go back? Are these sales still going to happen? And since then we've seen some interesting trades happening in New York. I am curious, what do you all think that the deal to actually purchase meant for New York office? I mean, it was clearly a vote of confidence. I totally get what you were saying, Paul, just about how that vote had been, taken a long time ago. But what do you each think it meant on a wider level throughout, the real estate business? Adam, do you have any thoughts about that?
I was kind of hoping Paul would take that one first, but
Paul could take that one first.
I'm happy to do it. I think it's just great.
Mark,
I think
you can take
personally,
it.
I think it's just great for the city. I think it's great for Google. I think it's great for us. I think that it came at the perfect time. Just taking a step back as it relates to New York, you can feel the energy on the streets in the last 120 days. It's changed tremendously. And it happened to coincide with that decision. I think that they were separate completely, but it just was another data point to show that. And I'd like to hear Paul's thinking just on his thought of it, but I think that it just showed another spot in the market of people really believing in what this city is, and believing that we all have to be together. And I think that there's a lot of merit to that, and you can see it on the streets and feel it on every train and subway, over the last 120 days or so.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I think, Max, as you said, there is still a lot of uncertainty of how different businesses are thinking about the return, how much real estate they might need, given the future may look different. And I think for us, it was very much a way for us to publicly, commit to not just our presence in New York, but the importance of place, the importance of place that creates innovation, collaboration, right? And a lot of businesses are in a very different place in terms of what I'm going to say a spectrum of maybe readiness to come back. And so again, for us, it was a chance to actually be public about our commitment. And the timing may shift and change relative to a COVID that we can't control, but the commitment is there. And I think New York needed that, right? New York needed an affirmation, and we were very happy to have that be, as Adam said, I don't think it could be better timed relative to where we are, and the vibrancy that is New York doesn't exist in every city yet. And so how do we continue a momentum and make sure that momentum is maintained, is sustained?
Mark, give us your perspective. Where has the market been since September, from your perch?
Well, I think it was a tremendous statement by Google, but we've seen other things during the pandemic. Facebook signed a big lease in the middle of the pandemic. And that and other companies, it's really a symbol that exactly what Paul was saying, that the workplace location still is really important, and it is important to go into urban centers. There's a reason why Facebook and Google want to be in New York and have a need to have office buildings in New York. We're seeing that from other developers that we're working with as well. You know, just personally, our office started to go back on a kind of limited basis, 1 or 2 days a week. We've been open essentially the whole time as a office as a resource for anyone that wanted to use it, but it's very low. And since we've had now 2 days a week hybrid, it's exactly what Paul's describing. You know, it's both things can be productive, working from home and working within the same workspace as a collaboration space. It's different, and I think that they're both necessary. And I think that offices and companies are going to be finding that more and more, and that's what we're seeing from a lot of our developer clients as well. That there's a lot more optimism. There's certainly, based on these lease signings, and also if you look at the residential market in New York.
Yeah, for sure. Paul, I want to get back to something that you mentioned. So you said that this decision had been made a while ago, that you would put down your roots a while ago. Could you tell us a little bit about Google's origin stories in New York real estate? A little bit about what the thinking was and the plan was.
So we started with a small office in Times Square. Eventually, we moved into, I think, 50,000 square feet in 111 8th. What's amazing about Google's New York story is that we've grown very organically over time, right? And we've evolved in terms of our presence in New York. We have multiple business partners who are actually the collective is the New York story. So it's engineering has a strong presence. Our global business operations has a strong presence. So what's been amazing is it may not have necessarily been planned as a 20-year growth in the way that we have has been very organic. But what has been over time, right? The ability for us to attract and retain talent in New York is part of why we continue to grow in New York at the scale that we're growing, which is roughly 1,300 people a year. So, we've been growing at that pace for certainly the last 5 years, and continue to do so. And so that's really where New York City has enabled Google to grow, is by this diverse talent pool that we are able to leverage. So I think, it's potentially not an accidental story, but certainly we've benefited from what is growth over time, and our presence in New York reflects that. Certainly our commitment to Chelsea, our kind of engagement with the community in Chelsea reflects our growing up together with New York, which has been very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Is the organic growth? Is this the last chapter, the St. John's, or is there more to come?
I would imagine we have more to come.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, tantalize away. Come to the Commercial Observer when you tell us what the next thing is. One of the things that a story like this one, like this deal, makes us all, I think, who think about real estate think about, is the fact that St. John's is one of the real last pieces where something this big can sort of take place in Manhattan. I did want to get all your takes on that. Where, is there another St. John's, possible in Manhattan, or is this just going to have to be a Brooklyn story or a Queens story from now on? Adam, what's your take on that?
I think it is absolutely possible that there are more St. John's out there. I think New York continues to evolve, and somebody could have said 10 years ago that Hudson Yards was the last frontier, and now we've got Hudson Square, and then I think some of the other neighborhoods that maybe are falling out of favor will reemerge again, and that's what's so exciting about New York City. So I think emphatically that this is not the last St. John's. I think there are others. Each one is unique for sure, but the story is going to evolve over and over and over for New York City because it's such an amazing place.
Mark, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the strengths and beauties of the city that we all live in, that it has this kind of dynamic quality to it. I mean, just look around the neighborhood that we're talking about. There's the UPS building that's there. Of course, that building and sanitation building, they're needed to make the city kind of run, but maybe UPS doesn't have to be there forever. And then that kind of distribution center can work differently. That's an enormous site. Google has, really pushed the boundaries by looking at something like Pier 57. There's other opportunities at the waterfront as well. And those, I think, can be incredibly exciting for our city.
Could do it like Dubai, where we like build fronds on the.
But I think it's not just a conversation about a St. John's terminal solution, right? Because not every company can leverage that type of asset in the same way. But it's a adaptive reuse development conversation, because we have a lot of legacy buildings that may not perform well in the future. And so how do we think about development and a range of development? The diversity of kind of asset class in New York is what makes it really exciting for the future, because that the redevelopment and repositioning, re-leveraging existing assets to make them perform better in today's environment is really the opportunity. And there are, I think, many opportunities across the New York, right?
Mark, what are your thoughts on that, on adaptive reuse? I mean, are you obviously a project that's 1 million plus square feet is kind of, unique, but have you been seeing any of those that you?
We find it absolutely fascinating. We think that it's very much part of the story of sustainability for New York City. There are all these existing buildings, and we can't just build new buildings. And the idea of adaptive reuse is paramount to kind of the future of New York, of looking at these buildings and seeing what's possible.
Adam, do you think that Oxford has a adaptive reuse future too?
Yeah, I think, look, with our experience around the world, that's what we see. I mean, you look at the age of office stock in most of these cities that we're in, they were built, before people were using, computers. And so it's absolutely necessary. I think Mark nailed it in terms of sustainability and what we want to achieve and what you can do with these things. And, it's about being creative and understanding the guts of the building and where the world is going and how to figure out what they can become, because tearing them all down is just not in the cards from a cost perspective and a time perspective. And there's got to be a better way to do a lot of these things, and people can find a lot of value in what's there, but in a new envisioned form.
For sure. Well, and Google has done that too. And like you guys basically did that with a lot of your Chelsea campus. Basically, it was reused. So now I did want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A from some of our viewers. We've had a couple of questions come in. If anybody has a last minute question who's watching, please do type it into the Q&A function. First question is from Richard Brennan. Google has implemented many advanced sustainability measures at 111 8th Avenue. What types of these measures are being considered for 550 Washington?
Mark, you want to start with that?
Oh, sure. It was one actually really exciting thing to bring on to start to work with Google. our office has been fascinated by this idea of something we call biophilic design, which is about connection to nature, and that people feel better when they feel connected to nature. That's kind of anecdotally, but there's a lot of science behind it as well, that your stress levels come way down when you have some kind of connection. And there's we don't have a ton of time to go deep into that, but tapping into some of the ambitious goals with Google and their sustainability programs. They really wanted to up the ante on the how ambitious the building was as well. It's a LEED Platinum building. So several things that once Google came on board, we could really up the ante and have some really interesting discussions about some of the sustainability programs.
Another question that came in. Can you talk about the decision to utilize View Smart Glass for the window wall? How did you get comfortable with A, the aesthetics, B, the cost, and C, the durability, including for future-proofing against future innovation? I don't know, this might be a Mark question, it might be an Adam question. Maybe it's a Paul question.
It might be a Paul question.
It might be a Paul question.
So I think we've been looking at View for quite some time, and it wasn't until recently that their most recent product development yielded what we think is a really great solution relative to the color of the glass. That then, when we started looking at the performance of the glass, the situation of our building with its most magnificently long sunset, it became almost an imperative that we brought them in to work with Oxford as we looked at the entire, and certainly with Mark and his team, of how might we implement the View Glass solution as part of the design that was well underway. And I think it was very much a collaboration across the three entities to figure out how to ensure a sustainability of and an experience within the office environment that wasn't impacted by blinds that would be down for the majority of the day, given the sunset on the Hudson. And it ensured our ability to deliver the kind of level of sustainability we were aspiring to. And so I think, Adam, if you or Mark want to talk about the work that we did to figure out the kind of right application, but very much a partnership in bringing View in to again, develop a product that worked for this asset in this location.
Yeah, and if we could also just say a little bit what View is, like what the glass does. Yes. Yeah.
View is a dynamic glazing system. It's not dissimilar from sunglasses that when you go inside they get clear, and when you go outside and it's needed, it darkens up. And it's on most of the building. As Paul's saying, it did come about fairly late in the game, but that's not to say that it wasn't really carefully considered and carefully analyzed. We did a whole lot of mock-ups. Whole team flew to Italy to see this mock-up of our curtain wall with the dynamic glazing system. It's actually a double wall system that has some automated blinds in it as well. So it's a little bit of a belt and suspender kind of system. So it gives a lot of flexibility, but it really helps with some of the sustainability goals on the project. So it was really fascinating. We've been studying it for years, and just like Paul's describing, we because of the kind of bluish tint of it, is something that we were never really satisfied with. But this latest iteration is much clearer, and it'll be fascinating to see what it looks like and feels like within the workplace building.
So we have a question. Can Adam give us a rough overview of its project's cost breakdown, acquisition price per square foot, approximate hard cost? The journalist in me loved that question. So, Adam, what say you?
I would, but Paul won't let me do that. So I think it's hard to give that right now, honestly, for us.
All right. Last question then. How do you plan to incorporate hybrid workspaces with some people returning to the offices and others working remotely or from home? How will these team players collaborate effectively? Paul, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So I think the intersection of technology and place is going to be even more critical as we go forward. And so there's multiple environments we're looking to create to begin to test and best understand how we leverage technology and ensure equal participation for those that may be working remote, and making sure the spaces best accommodate and support what might be a pivoting environment relative to the number of people that may be collaborating from remote locations. So I think we have a lot to learn as we bring people back, and we're going to be iterating and testing product as we start to see behavior. But it's a key for us.
Of course. On that note, we are out of time, but I want to thank an incredibly interesting panel. It's one that I was really excited for. So Mark Ozitsky, Paul Dara, Adam Frazier, thank you again so much for being here today. I'd like to thank you again for tuning in, everybody watching. I'd like to thank our program sponsor, Burden LLP. And if you haven't already done so, please be sure to register for tomorrow's in-person Innovators Forum and Awards reception. I will be there. I hope to see you there as well. Have a great day.
Dad, Mom had such a great vision for the company. I don't know that I can keep it going.
Amy, your mother worked with Burden to develop a plan. Don't worry.
Life and business can be hard, but finding the right advisor to help you, your family, and your business get where you want them to go doesn't have to be.
Stephen, get Burden on the line.
Burden LLP. We listen, we solve, we do.